Hello everyone. How are you, my friends? Thank you to the subscribers. Here, every story has a terrifying secret. Lonely houses, dangerous places, everything is terrifying. Subscribe now and sit with us in the dark. Let's begin. One cold December night in 2017, in the quiet suburbs of San Jose, California, the rain was falling softly, and the wet street reflected the yellow streetlights like shattered glass. In that peaceful neighborhood lived a man named Ethan Miller, a 36-year-old civil engineer working for a well-known construction company. He lived alone after his divorce 2 years earlier. Ethan was a calm, logical man, not the type to believe in ghosts or superstition. But what happened to him that winter night changed his life forever. That night, Ethan left work late as usual. It was around 11:30 p.m. The drive home wasn't long, but his route passed through a side road surrounded by tall pine trees that blocked most of the light. As the tires of his car slid slightly over the wet asphalt, something crossed in front of him, moving very slowly. He hit the brakes hard. The car stopped. Right in the middle of the street stood a large black cat, perfectly still, its wide eyes reflecting the glow of the streetlights. He chuckled to himself. Really? Crossing the street this calmly in the middle of the night? But the cat didn't move. It just stared at him, steady, unblinking, as if it were looking through him. Ethan drove forward a little, expecting the cat to run off like any normal animal, but it didn't. Instead, it took a single step toward the car. A strange chill ran down his spine, though the heater was on. After a long second, the cat turned slowly and disappeared into the trees. Ethan exhaled and said under his breath, "Probably someone's pet." He drove home, parked, hung up his coat, and made a cup of coffee to warm himself. Still, he couldn't stop thinking about the cat. There was something off about its eyes, not reflective, but absorbing the light. He brushed it off and fell asleep on the couch while the TV hummed in the background. Around 3 a.m., he woke up to the sound of a faint meow outside. At first, he thought he was dreaming, but then it came again, louder. He got up, walked to the window facing the street, and saw nothing. When he cracked the window open, a gust of cold air swept in, and then he heard it once more, closer now. And there it was, the same cat standing right in front of his porch, staring straight up at him. He froze. For a reason he couldn't explain, his chest tightened and he slammed the window shut, pulling the curtain down. That night, he didn't sleep at all. The next morning, his eyes were bloodshot. He went to work and said nothing. But the pattern continued. Every night, exactly at 3 a.m., he heard the same meowing. Always nearby, always waiting. Sometimes it came from the backyard, sometimes from the balcony. He tried earplugs, even music, but the sound pierced through everything. After a week, he bought a small security camera from an electronics store and set it up in the yard. The next morning, he checked the footage. Strangely, the camera stopped recording at 3:02 a.m. and resumed an hour later. Right before it cut off, the video showed the cat staring directly into the lens, but its face was blurred, distorted, as if the image itself refused to capture it. A shiver ran through Ethan's body so hard that the coffee mug nearly slipped from his hand. The following night, he decided to stay awake and monitor the feed from his phone. Around 3 the meowing returned. This time he grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The air was still damp, unnaturally quiet. "Hello?" he called. "Is anyone there?" No reply. Then, near the base of the oak tree at the edge of the yard, he saw the cat sitting there, but its body seemed to waver, as if trembling or changing shape. The flashlight reflected in its eyes with a strange grayish glow, not yellow like a normal animal's. Ethan took a hesitant step forward. The cat began to make a deep, low sound, half hiss, half moan, like metal grinding, and then the flashlight went out. He gasped, spun around when he heard footsteps behind him, but no one was there. He rushed back inside, locked every door and window, and sat in the dark until dawn. From that night on, everything in Ethan's life changed. He began hearing scratching at his door each evening. Shadows moved at the edge of his vision. In the mornings, he found small, wet paw prints on the kitchen floor, even though the doors were sealed shut. He became pale, withdrawn. His co-workers noticed he barely spoke anymore. Desperate, he went to see his elderly neighbor, Richard Grant, who had lived on the same street for over 30 years. They sat together in the garden as Ethan recounted everything. Richard listened quietly for a long moment, then said in a low voice, You know, this isn't the first time someone's seen that cat. About 10 years ago, our old neighbor Mary saw a huge black cat just like that outside her window. 3 days later, they found her dead in her bedroom. No cause. The doctor said her heart just stopped. Ethan felt cold all over. He didn't want to believe it, but something deep inside him already did. That night, while lying in bed, he woke suddenly to the sound of footsteps inside the house. Slow, heavy, getting closer. He grabbed his phone and switched on the flashlight. As he opened the door, no one was there, only a thick metallic smell, like burned flesh. Then he noticed something on the floor. A long strand of black fur, coarse and damp like from a tail. The next day, he packed his things and left the house, moving in temporarily with a friend downtown. But even after leaving, the cat haunted his dreams, always with those gray, lifeless eyes. Weeks later, Richard called him, his voice uneasy. He said the street surveillance cameras had been recording a large black cat sitting on Ethan's old porch every night at exactly the Rishan AM. Ethan never went back to the house on Pine Grove Street. He sold it months later and moved to Texas, hoping to start over. But sometimes, on quiet nights as he walks through empty streets, he swears he can feel a pair of eyes watching him from somewhere in the dark. And if he listens closely enough, he can still hear that faint familiar sound, the same meow that started it all. After selling his house in San Jose, Ethan Miller moved to Austin, Texas, hoping to leave behind the cold memories of Pine Grove Street. He rented a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, a quiet area surrounded by trees and low buildings. The first few weeks were peaceful. He started jogging in the mornings, found a new job at a construction firm, and even began dating a colleague named Lauren. For the first time in months, he felt like he was healing, but peace never lasts forever. It began subtly, small things, barely noticeable. One night, while sitting on the balcony drinking coffee, Ethan heard a faint sound, almost like a whispering wind, followed by a distant meow. He froze for a moment, but told himself it must be one of the stray cats in the area. Yet something inside him stirred, a feeling of déjà vu too familiar to ignore. The next night, the same sound returned, and the night after that again. He laughed it off at first, telling Lauren about his cursed cat story, and she chuckled, saying Texas cats aren't as scary as California ghosts. But Ethan's smile faded quickly. He wasn't sure it was a joke anymore. A week later, he came home late from work. The hallway lights of the building flickered slightly as he unlocked his door. When he stepped inside, everything looked normal, until he noticed a wet paw print near the kitchen counter. Just one. He stared at it for a long time, his throat dry. The air inside the apartment felt colder than it should have been. That night, he dreamed again. He was standing in a fog-covered street. Ahead of him, the same black cat waited, larger than ever, its eyes now a lifeless gray. It spoke this time, but not in words. It was like the sound was inside his head, echoing through his thoughts. "You left too soon." He woke up gasping, sweat soaking his shirt, his body trembling. The digital clock beside the bed blinked 3 a.m. The following days became unbearable. Ethan tried ignoring the noises at night, scratching sounds from the walls, the occasional knock on the window. But his fear grew worse. Lauren started noticing his behavior. The pale look in his eyes, the lack of sleep, the way he avoided looking at mirrors. One evening, she came over and found him sitting on the floor, staring blankly at the wall. "Ethan, what's wrong with you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's here," he whispered. "It found me again." Before she could answer, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. They both rushed in. Nothing was broken, nothing was out of place. But the faucet was running, dripping water rhythmically, and in the puddle beneath it were 3 distinct paw prints. Lauren left that night terrified. She stopped answering his calls after that. A few days later, desperate for answers, Ethan contacted a local priest, Father Raymond, who agreed to visit his apartment. The priest listened patiently as Ethan recounted everything: the cat, the dreams, the noises, the smell of burned air. When he finished, Father Raymond grew silent for a long while, then said quietly, "Sometimes when a spirit attaches itself to a person, it follows the soul, not the place. If this thing has chosen you, moving won't help." He sprinkled holy water in the apartment and recited prayers. Ethan felt a brief sense of peace that night, until around 3 a.m., when he awoke to the sound of his bedroom door creaking open slowly. He turned toward the doorway. There, half hidden by shadow, were two glowing gray eyes watching him from the darkness. The air grew icy. His chest tightened, and before he could move, he heard the same whisper echo inside his skull. "You can't leave me again." The next morning, Father Raymond called to check on him. Ethan didn't answer. Concerned, the priest drove to the apartment and knocked. No response. After alerting the building manager, they unlocked the door. Ethan's belongings were scattered. The bedroom window was open despite the freezing wind, and near the bed on the wooden floor were a set of large paw prints leading to the window. But outside there were no prints in the dust. No marks at all. Ethan Miller was never found. Neighbors later claimed they still heard scratching sounds in the hallway late at night. Some said they'd seen a large black cat sitting by the entrance of the building at exactly 3 a.m., staring at the second-floor windows. The same apartment where Ethan once lived, and every few months a new tenant moves in, but none stay for long. The Black Cat, based on real events reported in Travis County, Texas, 2018. In early 2019, almost a year after the mysterious disappearance of Ethan Miller, apartment 204 on Ridgeview Avenue, Austin, was listed for rent again. The management company didn't mention the incident to new applicants, only that the previous tenant had moved out suddenly. That's how Daniel Harris, a 28-year-old freelance photographer, ended up renting it. Daniel had just moved from Chicago after a messy breakup, looking for a fresh start. He liked the apartment's simplicity: a small living room, one bedroom, a large window that overlooked the quiet street. The first few days were ordinary. He unpacked, set up his equipment, and began exploring the area. But on the fifth night, something strange happened. He was editing photos on his laptop when he noticed a faint scratching sound, rhythmic, gentle, coming from the wall near his bed. He thought it might be a mouse. He tapped the wall. The sound stopped. He shrugged it off and returned to work. Around 3 a.m., he woke up to the same sound again. This time it was louder. When he turned on the lamp, the scratching stopped abruptly, replaced by a single long meow outside the window. He stood there frozen for a few seconds before slowly pulling the curtain aside. The street was empty. No cats, no movement. Just silence and the pale orange glow of the streetlights. The next morning, he mentioned it to the building's janitor, Mrs. Alvarez, an elderly woman who'd worked there for over 20 years. Her expression darkened the moment he described the sound. "You live in 204, right?" she asked. "Yeah, why?" "That apartment. Some things happened there. Maybe you should keep your windows locked." Daniel pressed her for more details, but she shook her head. "Just stories," she muttered and walked away. That evening, curiosity got the better of him. While cleaning the closet in the bedroom, he noticed that the floorboards beneath a stack of old paint cans were uneven. When he pulled them aside, he found a small dust-covered metal box wedged between the planks. Inside were a few photographs, some printed documents, and a voice recorder wrapped in plastic. The photos were mostly of a black cat, taken from different angles, on the porch, in a garden, on a rainy street. Each photo had a date written on the back, all from late 2017. The final picture was disturbing: a blurry figure standing near a window, and behind the glass, two glowing gray eyes. The documents were Ethan Miller's, bills, letters, and a printed email draft addressed to someone named Father Raymond. The last line read, "If anything happens to me, it's not gone. It follows." Daniel hesitated before pressing play on the voice recorder. A faint static filled the room, followed by Ethan's shaky voice. "It's here again. Third night in a row. I locked every door. Still I hear it walking. It's not just a cat anymore. It knows my name." Then there was a scratching sound, a low growl, and the recording cut off. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. Around 2:57 a.m., the scratching returned, louder than before, this time coming from both the wall and the window. He turned on every light in the apartment, but the sounds continued. Then silence. A few seconds later, 3 soft knocks echoed from the window pane. Daniel froze, staring at the curtain. His heart pounded so hard he could hear the blood in his ears. Gathering every bit of courage, he slowly pulled the curtain aside. There, sitting on the narrow ledge outside the window, was a black cat, soaked from the rain, its fur glistening under the streetlight. Its eyes were not green, not yellow. They were dull gray like ash. The cat didn't blink. It just stared at him, its mouth slightly open as if smiling. Daniel stumbled backward, tripping over his chair. When he looked again, the cat was gone. The next morning, he packed his belongings and went straight to the building office to terminate the lease. The manager, confused, asked, "Was there a problem with the apartment?" Daniel handed her the box he'd found, his hands trembling. "You should see what's in there." Later that week, the box was turned over to the police. The official report noted that the photographs and the recorder were indeed from Ethan Miller's missing person case, though no new evidence emerged. But here's where things get darker. The police officer assigned to process the evidence, Detective Carla Mendez, took the recorder home to review it in a quiet environment. That night, her husband reported that she woke up screaming around 3:15 a.m., saying she saw two gray eyes staring at her through the window. The following morning, her dog refused to enter the bedroom. The apartment at Ridgeview Avenue was never rented again. The building eventually changed management, and apartment 204 was sealed off for maintenance. Locals say that on rainy nights, if you walk past that side of the building at exactly 3 a.m., you might see a black shape sitting by the window, motionless, watching. And if you look closely enough, you'll see that its reflection in the glass isn't a cat at all. It's a man's face, pale, silent, with eyes the color of ash. End of the Black Cat trilogy, based on witness statements and recovered files, Austin, Texas, 2019. It was the summer of 1998 when my father and his close friend, a local agricultural engineer named Richard Cooper, decided to start a small business together. Their idea was simple: raise chickens for meat production, a small poultry project, just enough to make some money on the side. After a week of searching, they found what seemed like the perfect place: a large old farmhouse on the edge of a quiet town in Willow Creek, Ohio. The owner, a blind man named Mr. Benjamin Crow, lived upstairs with his wife and two daughters. The ground floor with its wide backyard was available for rent, exactly what my father and Richard needed. We moved in quickly. My father said it would be just for a few months until the business stabilized. The house itself was strange, built mostly from old, dark wood that creaked under every step. At night, you could hear footsteps from the upper floor, slow and heavy, followed by the tapping of Mr. Crow's cane. It echoed through the floorboards like a heartbeat. At first, we thought it was just the sound of an old house settling, but soon we realized it wasn't. During the day, everything felt fine. My grandmother read her Bible near the window, my mother cooked in the small kitchen, and my father worked with the chickens outside in the shed near the back garden. But at night, the air changed. Grandma said she didn't feel peace while praying. She complained that her Bible would slide out of her hands or fall off the table on its own. Once, she even swore that someone snatched it from her grip and threw it across the room. My mother, too, began to notice things. Every morning, she'd find the food she prepared the night before for lunch in the trash, ruined, as if someone had gone through it on purpose. When she asked my father, he just frowned. "Probably raccoons," he said, but she knew it wasn't. A few days later, I overheard my father talking with Mr. Crow outside in the garden. Their voices were low, almost whispering. My father's expression was pale and tense when he came back inside. He didn't say a word, just packed a small bag and left for the rest of the evening. That night, I woke up around 2:30 a.m. to use the bathroom, a place that terrified me even in daylight. The tiles were black and white like a chessboard, and in the center stood an old clawfoot tub with rusted metal legs that looked like animal claws. I hated it. The hallway light didn't work. I turned the bathroom switch. Nothing. The darkness was suffocating. I left the door half open to let some light from the living room lamp spill in. Then, as I stood there, the door slammed shut behind me. Total darkness. I froze. My breath quickened. I reached for the doorknob, cold metal, and that's when I felt it. Another hand was already there. Cold, bony fingers pressed against mine from the other side. I screamed and tried to pull the door open, but it wouldn't move. My mother's voice shouted from the other side, "Let go of the handle." I yelled back, crying, "I'm not holding it! Someone's in here." There was a moment of silence and then a faint laugh. A whisper so close to my ear that I felt the air move. "Don't go. The door flew open with a violent crack, nearly hitting my mother in the face. She pulled me into her arms as I sobbed uncontrollably. She didn't ask questions. She just held me tight and whispered prayers under her breath. The next day, the fear faded in the sunlight. My sister Anna suggested we go exploring with Lily Crow, one of the blind man's daughters. Lily told us about an abandoned house next door, once owned by a European family that had moved to Willow Creek decades ago. The Moretti family, Italian immigrants. According to her, the family left suddenly after their teenage son was found dead in their swimming pool, his blood staining the water red. The rumor was that the house remained untouched since that night, every door still open, every item left behind. Of course, we had to see it. We climbed the fence that separated the two properties. The Moretti house was covered in vines, its windows broken, its doors slightly open as if waiting for us. Inside, dust hung thick in the air, furniture covered in white sheets, books still on the shelves, clothes in the closets. It felt wrong, like walking into someone's memory that refused to fade. My sister and Lily were fascinated. I wasn't. I felt watched. Every creak of the floorboards made my heart race. We reached the back garden, where the empty swimming pool sat beneath a large oak tree. Its cracked tiles were dry, but the faint outline of dark stains was still visible at the bottom. Lily started picking small fruits from the tree that had fallen into the pool. My sister joined her, laughing. I stood above them, whispering, "Please, let's just go." They finally agreed, climbing the metal ladder out, but as Lily reached the edge, her foot slipped. She fell backward hard, her head hitting the bottom of the pool with a dull thud. Blood spread slowly across the cracked tiles. I screamed. I swear I saw something down there with her, like a shadow pulling at her clothes. Within seconds, a woman in an old country dress appeared, I don't know from where, and helped lift Lily out of the pool. My father arrived soon after, and we rushed her to the hospital. She survived, needing stitches on her head, but she wouldn't speak for days after that. That night, my grandmother and mother begged my father to leave. He didn't argue this time. He looked exhausted, afraid. The next morning, as we packed, my little brother started crying. His favorite wind-up toy, a small ice cream truck, had been smashed flat as if someone had stomped on it. No one could explain how. Then just before dawn, my father went to check on the chickens. Minutes later, he came running back, pale as a ghost. All of the chickens were dead. Every single one. Their throats torn open, blood everywhere. That was it. We left that same morning. My father didn't even lock the house. We just got in the car and drove. As we pulled away, I looked up one last time at the upper window. Mr. Crow was standing there, without his dark glasses, his pale eyes following our car down the road, and beside him, I saw the faint outline of a young man, tall, with hollow eyes, watching too, the same face I'd seen in a faded photograph inside the abandoned Moretti house. My mother noticed my expression, turned to see what I was looking at, and when she did, she held my face close to her chest, whispering, "Don't look back." We never did, and the old farmhouse on Willow Creek has stood empty ever since. It was the summer of 1998 when my father and his close friend, a local agricultural engineer named Richard Cooper, decided to start a small business together. Their idea was simple: raise chickens for meat production, a small poultry project, just enough to make some money on the side. After a week of searching, they found what seemed like the perfect place, a large old farmhouse on the edge of a quiet town in Willow Creek, Ohio. The owner, a blind man named Mr. Benjamin Crow, lived upstairs with his wife and two daughters. The ground floor with its wide backyard was available for rent, exactly what my father and Richard needed. We moved in quickly. My father said it would be just for a few months until the business stabilized. The house itself was strange, built mostly from old, dark wood that creaked under every step. At night, you could hear footsteps from the upper floor, slow and heavy, followed by the tapping of Mr. Crow's cane. It echoed through the floorboards like a heartbeat. At first, we thought it was just the sound of an old house settling, but soon we realized it wasn't. During the day, everything felt fine. My grandmother read her Bible near the window, my mother cooked in the small kitchen, and my father worked with the chickens outside in the shed near the back garden. But at night, the air changed. Grandma said she didn't feel peace while praying. She complained that her Bible would slide out of her hands or fall off the table on its own. Once, she even swore that someone snatched it from her grip and threw it across the room. My mother, too, began to notice things. Every morning, she'd find the food she prepared the night before for lunch in the trash, ruined, as if someone had gone through it on purpose. When she asked my father, he just frowned. Probably raccoons, he said, but she knew it wasn't. A few days later, I overheard my father talking with Mr. Crow outside in the garden. Their voices were low, almost whispering. My father's expression was pale and tense when he came back inside. He didn't say a word, just packed a small bag and left for the rest of the evening. That night, I woke up around 2:30 a.m. to use the bathroom, a place that terrified me even in daylight. The tiles were black and white like a chessboard, and in the center stood an old clawfoot tub with rusted metal legs that looked like animal claws. I hated it. The hallway light didn't work. I turned the bathroom switch. Nothing. The darkness was suffocating. I left the door half open to let some light from the living room lamp spill in. Then, as I stood there, the door slammed shut behind me. Total darkness. I froze. My breath quickened. I reached for the doorknob, cold metal, and that's when I felt it. Another hand was already there. Cold, bony fingers pressed against mine from the other side. I screamed and tried to pull the door open, but it wouldn't move. My mother's voice shouted from the other side, "Let go of the handle." I yelled back, crying, "I'm not holding it! Someone's in here." There was a moment of silence and then a faint laugh. A whisper so close to my ear that I felt the air move. "Don't go." The door flew open with a violent crack, nearly hitting my mother in the face. She pulled me into her arms as I sobbed uncontrollably. She didn't ask questions. She just held me tight and whispered prayers under her breath. The next day, the fear faded in the sunlight. My sister Anna suggested we go exploring with Lily Crow, one of the blind man's daughters. Lily told us about an abandoned house next door, once owned by a European family that had moved to Willow Creek decades ago. The Moretti family, Italian immigrants. According to her, the family left suddenly after their teenage son was found dead in their swimming pool, his blood staining the water red. The rumor was that the house remained untouched since that night. Every door still open, every item left behind. Of course, we had to see it. We climbed the fence that separated the two properties. The Moretti house was covered in vines, its windows broken, its doors slightly open as if waiting for us. Inside, dust hung thick in the air. Furniture covered in white sheets, books still on the shelves, clothes in the closets. It felt wrong, like walking into someone's memory that refused to fade. My sister and Lily were fascinated. I wasn't. I felt watched. Every creak of the floorboards made my heart race. We reached the back garden, where the empty swimming pool sat beneath a large oak tree. Its cracked tiles were dry, but the faint outline of dark stains was still visible at the bottom. Lily started picking small fruits from the tree that had fallen into the pool. My sister joined her, laughing. I stood above them, whispering, "Please, let's just go." They finally agreed, climbing the metal ladder out, but as Lily reached the edge, her foot slipped. She fell backward hard, her head hitting the bottom of the pool with a dull thud. Blood spread slowly across the cracked tiles. I screamed. I swear, I saw something down there with her, like a shadow pulling at her clothes. Within seconds, a woman in an old country dress appeared, I don't know from where, and helped lift Lily out of the pool. My father arrived soon after, and we rushed her to the hospital. She survived, needing stitches on her head, but she wouldn't speak for days after that. That night, my grandmother and mother begged my father to leave. He didn't argue this time. He looked exhausted, afraid. The next morning, as we packed, my little brother started crying. His favorite wind-up toy, a small ice cream truck, had been smashed flat as if someone had stomped on it. No one could explain how. Then just before dawn, my father went to check on the chickens. Minutes later, he came running back, pale as a ghost. All of the chickens were dead. Every single one. Their throats torn open, blood everywhere. That was it. We left that same morning. My father didn't even lock the house. We just got in the car and drove. As we pulled away, I looked up one last time at the upper window. Mr. Crow was standing there, without his dark glasses, his pale eyes following our car down the road, and beside him, I saw the faint outline of a young man, tall, with hollow eyes, watching too. the same face I'd seen in a faded photograph inside the abandoned Moretti house. My mother noticed my expression, turned to see what I was looking at, and when she did, she held my face close to her chest, whispering, "Don't look back." We never did, and the old farmhouse on Willow Creek has stood empty ever since. Last Friday, we traveled to a small isolated village in northern England to treat one of the strangest cases I've ever encountered in my life. No exaggeration. My day started early, around 6 a.m. I got up, dressed, prayed, and recited my morning verses. I read Ayat al-Kursi 70 times for protection, then anointed myself with red musk oil that had been blessed through Ruqya. By then, I felt completely shielded, spiritually fortified, and ready for whatever I might face. I met Sheikh Ibrahim, my mentor, and Omar, one of his students. The three of us were going to work together on this case because, as I had already been told, it was not an easy one. We set off toward the home of Mr. Andrew Miller, a man whose life had completely fallen apart in the past few months. He claimed his house was haunted, and that he and his wife had been suffering from a severe case of the evil eye. After almost an hour and a half of driving through fog-covered countryside roads, we finally reached the village. Mr. Miller was waiting for us outside a lonely stone house surrounded by dying trees. He greeted us warmly and invited us inside. After the usual hospitality, tea, small talk, Sheikh Ibrahim asked Andrew to tell us everything, in detail. Andrew sighed deeply, his hands shaking slightly. "Something unnatural has been happening here," he began. "I used to own a small grocery store in town. Business was great, my family was happy. Then all of a sudden everything collapsed. My sales dropped for no reason. At home I started feeling suffocated all the time. I couldn't stand my wife or my kids. I became lazy, unmotivated, and every night I heard these strange cries around the house. Low sobbing sounds moving from room to room, but I could never find where they were coming from." He paused and looked toward the dark hallway before continuing. "Then came the worst part. Every night when I'd try to sleep, I'd see a huge black cat standing at the foot of my bed, just staring at me. It didn't move. It only smiled, a horrible, twisted smile. When I turned the lights on, it vanished. But when I closed my eyes again, it came back. Sometimes I'd see dark shapes moving around my room, floating just beyond reach. And the worst thing, I started seeing my wife's face change. I'd look at her and she looked like an animal, like a monkey. I couldn't bear to look at her." His voice trembled as he added, "I thought I was losing my mind until my son told me the same thing. He said a black cat scratches him at night, but when he turns on the light, there's nothing there. We can't live like this anymore, please. Help us." When he finished, Sheikh Ibrahim placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Everything happens by God's will, my son," he said calmly. "We will help you, with his permission." We divided our tasks. The sheikh would spiritually scan Andrew, his wife, and the house. I would prepare holy water and mix coarse salt with Ayat al-Kursi recited over it 7 times. Omar would seal the house, spread incense made of frankincense and musk, and close all exits during the ritual. After examining Andrew and his wife, Sheikh Ibrahim confirmed the presence of intense envy, the evil eye, and something darker, a demonic entity inhabiting the house. He also detected black magic powder scattered near the main doorway, something the family must have stepped over. As I began sprinkling the blessed salt in every corner, Omar burned the incense, filling the air with a thick, sharp scent. Suddenly, in the guest room, something appeared out of nowhere. A large lizard, clinging to the wall, but it wasn't normal. It was too big. Its eyes glowing faintly, its body motionless as stone. Then, it made a sound akin to harsh, guttural noise like whispering in a foreign tongue. We froze. We knew instantly this wasn't an animal. It was a jinn, manifesting in the form of a lizard. I lifted the spray bottle filled with the salted water, aimed it at the creature, and loudly declared, "By God's name, we will destroy you." The moment the droplets hit the wall, it vanished instantly. As if it had turned to smoke, we didn't stop. We knew this was only an intimidation tactic. We continued cleansing the entire house, room by room. When we entered the master bedroom, we felt it immediately, a heavy presence colder than before. As I sprinkled the salt along the bed's edge, Sheikh Ibrahim suddenly pointed to the floor. There, Carved faintly into one of the tiles beside the bed was a symbol, a strange ancient mark, circular and filled with intersecting lines. It wasn't drawn recently, it looked etched into the stone itself. The sheikh covered it with blessed musk oil and instructed Andrew to keep it hidden under furniture and to never touch it again. When we were done, we wrote verses against envy on white paper using special ink, dissolved it in water, and told Andrew and his wife to drink from it and bathe with it daily for a week. We left them with olive oil that had been prayed over with Surah Al-Baqarah and red musk for protection. We instructed them to spray the oil every morning and before sleep, and to drink the blessed water after dawn and sunset. That night, we received a message from Andrew. He said the air in the house felt lighter. The cat never appeared again. And for the first time in months, they slept peacefully. "You saved us," he said. God bless you all. And that was it. Another reminder that what we can't see can still see us. Ashk inspired by true events. Truck drivers are among the people who experience the most terrifying things on the road. They often drive alone, sometimes through deserted areas late at night just to save time, and this is a story told by one of them in his own words. It was around 1 in the morning. I had just finished a long shift when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Hello?" I answered. A calm voice replied, "Hey Daniel, I need a ride around 3 in the morning. I was exhausted, but a late-night trip usually meant good money. Does it have to be that time?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "It's important. My family and I need to catch the first train out." Something about the way he said it made me pause. "How did you get my name?" I asked. He chuckled softly. "You're a cab driver, aren't you? Your number's everywhere." Then he gave me an address just outside the city and reminded me not to be late. After hanging up, I felt a strange tightness in my chest, an unexplainable anxiety that made my skin crawl. But I brushed it off, set my alarm, and told myself I'd just sleep for a couple of hours before the job. At exactly 3, I drove to the address. The place was quiet, too quiet. Under the dim yellow streetlight, I saw a man standing with 2 children. He waved me down. The man was in his late 50s, wearing an old gray coat and a black hat. The kids stood close to him, pale and silent. "Good evening," I greeted as they got in. The man sat up front. The kids climbed into the back. Strangely, none of them replied. Not even a nod. There was a heavy silence in the car, a suffocating kind of quiet. Even the kids didn't make a sound. They didn't fidget, didn't move, didn't whisper. When they got in, it was, they didn't climb in normally. It was as if they slid inside the car like their bodies had no weight. I thought maybe they were just sleepy. A few minutes later, I began to notice a strange smell. It wasn't rotten, but wrong, old, heavy, like damp clothes that had been locked away for years. I sprayed some air freshener near the AC vent. The reaction was immediate. The man and both children started coughing and gasping. "Stop it." "Please," the man said sharply. "We'll suffocate." I apologized quickly, turned off the air, and rolled the windows down. The cold air rushed in, but the silence returned. After about 15 minutes, the man spoke again. "Take the road through the forest," he said firmly. I frowned. "That's not the way to the train station. That road leads to the old cemetery." He looked at me, eyes glinting strangely under the streetlight. "I know, we just need to stop there first. My wife's grave. We're traveling far and we won't be back for a long time." Something in his voice made me uneasy, but I agreed. The forest road was narrow and dark. No lamps, no houses, just trees closing in on both sides. Then, out of nowhere, a blinding white light appeared ahead. Around it I saw animals, cats and dogs, circling and yowling. It was a horrifying sight. The 2 children suddenly began to laugh. High, shrill laughter that didn't sound human. They clapped their hands, giggling wildly as the light flickered. The man turned to them sharply and they went dead silent. Then he whispered, "They're welcoming us home, aren't they?" A chill shot down my spine. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I could barely breathe. "Go back," he said suddenly. "Take the dirt path on the left." I did as he said, just to get away from that light. The road was bumpy and full of holes leading toward the cemetery. Our city's old cemetery doesn't have a fence. It stretches wide across the fields, open and silent. I drove through slowly, following the man's quiet instructions until he pointed toward a single grave under a large oak tree. "Here," he said softly. I stopped. My heart was pounding. I looked down at my phone to check the time, 3:47 a.m. When I looked up again, the seats were empty. All of them. Gone. I don't remember how I drove home. I just remember trembling, drenched in sweat, and locking every door and window before collapsing on my couch. The next day, I told my friend Lucas about what happened. He didn't believe me, but he agreed to come with me at sunset to see for himself. We went back. The graveyard looked calm, quiet, and normal. We found the caretaker, an old man watering the grass. Lucas gave him a small tip and asked about the grave under the oak tree. The caretaker's face fell. "That's the grave of Richard Miller and his 2 children," he said softly. "They died in a car accident on the highway. 10 years ago, Lucas went pale. I couldn't move." The caretaker added quietly, "People say they still come back sometimes, when the roads are empty and the night is cold. And since that night, I've never answered another unknown number again." My name is Michael. Last year, after a bad breakup and years of city noise, I decided to move out of everything I knew. I wanted quiet, solitude, somewhere I could hear myself think again. I found a small farmhouse on the edge of town, about an hour's drive from the nearest city. It wasn't fancy, but it was cheap, and the real estate agent said it had been in the same family for decades. I didn't ask why they sold it. The house was surrounded by wheat fields on 3 sides and a thin line of trees on the 4th. It had a single dirt road leading up to it and no neighbors in sight. It felt perfect, peaceful. At first it was. The mornings were beautiful. Fog rolling over the fields, sunlight cutting through the mist. I'd sit outside with coffee and watch the wind bend the wheat like waves. At night I'd light a fire, listen to music, and read. It felt like I'd finally escaped. Then, after about 2 weeks, the small things started. The first thing I noticed was the front gate. I always locked it, always. One morning it was wide open. The latch wasn't broken. It had been lifted, as if someone had opened it deliberately. I thought maybe the wind had done it. But the next day it happened again. I started locking it with a chain instead of just the latch. Still, a few days later I woke up to find it open once more. Chain unhooked neatly, not cut. That was when I decided to check my cameras. I had small solar ones, motion activated, facing the gate and front porch. The footage showed nothing. No one approaching. No movement. Just the gate suddenly open in one frame. I told myself it was a glitch. Then at night I began hearing footsteps on the porch. Slow, heavy ones when I opened the door, nothing. Just the quiet hum of insects and the sound of the wind moving through the wheat. The dogs from a nearby farm started barking around 2 or 3 a.m. almost every night. Always facing my direction. I started to lose sleep. One night, I woke up at 3:11 a.m. to a faint tapping sound, like fingers on glass. I froze. It was coming from the window beside my bed. The curtain was drawn, but I could see the outline of a hand. I grabbed my flashlight and pulled the curtain open, and there was no one there, just fog. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The next morning I found a single muddy handprint on the outside of the glass. I checked my cameras again. Again, nothing. The fog must have blocked the sensors. The strange part was that the print was small, like a child's. I didn't have any neighbors with kids. After that night, I started documenting everything. Dates, times, temperatures, even wind direction. I thought maybe it was environmental. Maybe air pressure made the doors shift or animals triggered the cameras. I needed to believe there was an explanation. Then came the whistling. It started softly, a tune, like someone humming through their teeth coming from somewhere in the fields. At first I thought it was a passing sound carried by the wind. But it grew louder, clearer. Always the same melody. Always between 2:55 and 3:10 a.m. When I went outside with a flashlight, the sound would stop immediately. The moment I turned back toward the house, it started again. Faint, distant, but following. I didn't sleep for 2 nights after that. Eventually, I called the previous owner, an older woman named Margaret, who had inherited the property decades ago. I told her about the sounds, the gate, the handprint. There was a long silence on the phone before she finally said, "Don't go into the barn at night." I froze. I hadn't mentioned the barn. She said, "It's part of the house's land right behind the tree line." I told her yes. She said, "My husband built it in '79. He used to hear the same things you're hearing now. He stopped going in after sunset, said the place watched him." Then she hung up. I didn't believe in that kind of stuff, but her tone rattled me. That night I couldn't resist. Around 2:30 a.m., I took my flashlight and went to the barn. The door was half open. The air inside was thick with dust and old hay. My light caught the shapes of tools, boxes, and something that looked like a coat hanging on the wall. Then I realized it wasn't a coat. It was a tarp covering a door, a small square trapdoor in the ground. It looked recently disturbed. The dirt around it was uneven. I knelt down, pulled the tarp aside, and saw that the handle had been polished clean. No dust, unlike the rest of the barn. Someone had used it recently. I didn't open it. I left, locked the barn, and went back inside. That night, the whistling didn't come from the fields. It came from underneath the floorboards. Moved out 2 weeks later, sold the house to a man who told me he wasn't scared of country noises. I never told him what I'd heard. That was 6 months ago. Last night I got an email from him. The subject line just said, "Does the barn have a basement?"